Alright, so let's go over the basic UI for InDesign. As soon as you open up the program, you guys are going to see your welcome screen. Now within this welcome screen, we can open an old file, find a new file, or make a new file. And down here, you should have your recent files, which you can change from recent to order by name and so forth. I am going to make a new file. Now, my file size is going to be 8.5 by 11 because it is a regular piece of paper. Now I can tell it whether I want 1 page or if I want 10 pages and whether those pages are facing each other. I can set up my columns and gutters from here if that is to be quicker. And I can also set up my margins and my bleed and slug from here. We can also preview so that we can preview our file as it is being made. Now these same settings can be accessed through here where it says adjust layout further on after we've made the actual file. My properties panel, as we have with all Adobe software, is giving me the settings for my pasteboard. This gray space back here is called pasteboard. It's the same for all 3 softwares, Adobe, Photoshop, Illustrator, and InDesign. Within your pasteboard, you can set your margins, which is the space inside of your page. You can set your bleed, which is the space that's outside of your page where you want to extend your images to, so that when we print, we cut within our image and we never get a mistake that way. We can also see our grids. This is the baseline grid, I believe, as we can now see, and or the document grid. Now this is for your rulers, which you can also bring up with the shortcut Command R. And then you have guides down here. It's important to mention that I keep properties open, pages, and layers, because properties are very important, and depending on what it is that you're touching, that panel updates itself and it gives you relevant setting information for whatever it is that you're touching. You need the pages panel because from here we'll be able to add more pages. This is my cover page, and then these are my spreads within my document, and then I can add more pages down here if I see fit, or I can use this. Up here I have the page panel. Here on the right hand side, further on, we have the layers panel, and it works very much like in Photoshop and Illustrator. Please be mindful that your parent pages are being applied to the bottom of whatever page you're on. So your page numbers are going to be at the very bottom of all these elements. Another very important panel you'll always want to have open is your links panel. All images that you bring in work with a link, meaning that they are linked to wherever it is that they live outside of your document. Let's say, as I prepared my file for this, which is my project 1 folder, I have a folder that's just for links, meaning images that I bring over. Because if I was to move any of these images, then my program would lose access to that image and it will give me a warning. Now we can refresh those links with this button that's been grayed out because it doesn't need to be updated, and or I can do it manually with this button over here, but I would then have to go find wherever it is that photo sits in. It's very important that you have good naming conventions and that you know exactly where your folders are. So great organizational skills are very needed for this software. The rest I keep around for no particular reason, because as you guys can see, most of these settings come up on their own depending on what it is that I'm touching. And if, for example, there was something that doesn't come up, I can access it through here. By pressing those 3 buttons, then I can get the whole panel as it would out here. Exactly the same. So over here on the left-hand side, we have our basic tools, and I'm going to quickly rummage through all of our basic tools. So first up, we have our selection tools up here and how to edit those selections. So first, the is the shortcut for a regular selection tool or regular black arrow. And as you guys can see, this moves stuff that is grouped. Let's say all of this was grouped, it would move it all together. If all of this was then grouped and I was to have my direct selection tool, shortcut A, then I could go with that selection cursor and move individual items within that. I can use it also to edit selection points, and we can edit shapes and such. Text boxes also have selection points in the corner, so that's something that we could edit that with. Moving on to the next one, we have our page tool, shortcut Shift P. And what this does is that it lets us edit the page itself. You're going to notice that up here in our control panel, which pops up information pertinent to the tool that we're clicking on, it has brought up page settings. I could easily tell it, whatever page I'm on, that I want this to be turned into a tabloid page size, and it has done it for me. I could also do this with the cursor, except to have a parent applied to this page, so it will not let itself be edited that way. As you can see here, it's controlled by a parent. So moving on, we have our gap tool, shortcut U. Our gap tool lets us, as the name suggests, edit the gaps between things like text boxes or images. Now moving on, we have our content collectors and our content placer tools. So with the collector, we take that information and it will get loaded onto this bottom bar. And with our placer tool, we can then place that information back onto whatever elements. So let's say I can pick these up and load them onto the bar. And I had a bunch of frames set up somewhere else, which I can then grab my images, right, or my elements, which I have in this bar, and drop them onto other places, such. I'm going to go ahead and delete that. So then we have our text tool and type on a path tool. With our type tool, we can make a text box. Notice that up here within your type menu on top, you can further find some little things that we can add that we'll not be able to find with any of the panels that are open. For example, the fill with placeholder text. Then our type on path tool will let us type onto a path. So let's say I have a shape groups. Then with our type on a path tool, if I have a shape, I can use that tool to type onto the path of this shape, meaning I would be going around the border, right? Because that is the path, and I can use that as a path. I could also draw it with a pen tool and have that be the path and so forth. Moving on, we have our align tool. And like the name suggests, it makes lines. You can add more of a girth to your line or path over here on the right-hand side or up here. These two repeat. Reason being the properties panel is very recent. I don't want to say very recent, but it's fairly recent to all of the Adobe softwares. I think it works out a lot better. And prior to that, this was the convention. Sometimes some tools will not be over here, so just keep that in mind. So I was adding a corner, not a stroke. So let's add a stroke to our path. Now it has a stroke. Right, we have our stroke and then fill over here, as we do with all or most Adobe softwares. So moving on from the tool, we have our pen tool. Now with the pen tool, we can once again draw a path. With the plus and minus version, we can add points on that path or take points away. If we were to take one away, we can do that with that. And if we were to add, we could add like so and keep adding if need be. But then we have within that the convert direction point tool. which lets me turn that point from having Bezier? Is it Bezier? It lets me edit the convert points. You guys can see some quick buttons over here on the right hand side. So what happens is that it'll go from having the handle to having nothing, being straight and back and forth. If I manage to grab onto the button. Now, our pencil tool, as the name suggests, makes very organic shapes. And if we double click on that, we can smooth that shape out if we need be. Do that once again now that it's smoother. As you guys can see, it makes smoother shapes. And I access that panel by double clicking on the pencil tool itself. The smooth tool does basically that, and your erase tool will erase, of course. Then we come to another very important tool, which is our frame tool, shortcut F. If we want to drop in an image, my suggestion is to always put the frame first. And then you can literally drag and drop your images, and it's so much easier to do it that way than trying to just drop images in. It'll do that, but then it'll come in as its true size in comparison to your file. This way we keep it contained, we keep it clean, and we can auto fit so that we don't spend 3 years trying to auto fit the picture within the frame. Now, you may have noticed that that little bar comes up. This little handlebar comes up every time we're near a photo. And that's because that little handlebar handles the photo inside of the frame. The frame lives independently of the photograph. Our image lives inside of the frame, and the frame acts as a mask. All images within InDesign live with a frame. Now notice that the frame is showing us that the link is active, meaning it's working well, and our link panel is over here. And if it was not working well, we will get a little warning next to it, and InDesign will also let us know. All right, now notice that if I double click our image, this shape, this brownish orangey shape, is my image. This blue shape is my frame. So be careful which one you're grabbing. Now we can also make ellipses or polygons. And this is my shape tool, a shortcut M, as it is within Illustrator. And once again, we can make ellipses, polygons, same shortcut for the ellipses tool that is in Illustrator and Photoshop. Now onto our next tool, which is the scissors. Just do exactly as that sounds like. So let's say I have a shape. I can use my scissors to cut into that path with that shape. You can cut there and there. And now if I was to move that away with my selection arrow, you'll notice that it's no longer joint. We can do that to any shape or any path. Our free transform tool, we should be able to transform any shape we need, any which way. Otherwise, our text box would not be behaving this way. Whatever it is that I do to this can also be seen up here. So let's say I wanted to change the angle, but that could also be a quick way to do so. Let's say I wanted to shear it, which is another tool within this tool, which is the shear tool, which slants or shears, as the name suggests, is also up there. The scale tool and rotate tool obviously do as you would think. Then we also have up here some quick rotation tools and flipping tools if the occasion calls for it. Now onto our next tool is the gradient tool. Now, as the name suggests, makes gradients. Shortcut G as it is within the rest of the softwares. So first we would need a shape to apply this gradient to. So I would make a shape, go to the gradient tool, double click it to bring the panel out, and then apply this to the shape and make a gradient within that shape, except it's applying it to that. So we don't want that. We want it in the fill, not the outline. Try that one more time. Still doing it. Let's try that one more time. There we go. Now I can tell it whether I want it to be radial or linear. I can double click here. Sometimes it does it, sometimes it doesn't. It can be a little temperamental. when I double click, it should let me pick the color. But if it does not, then I need to bring up my library. Once I have that selected, go to my library and I can pick a color and then do it like it should. Select again, give that corner that color, double click on the other side and give that corner another color. Now notice that we have two kinds of gradient tools. We have regular gradient tool and then we have our feather, meaning that one goes color to color, full color, and the other tool goes from color to nothing, right? No pixels in that frame. You still have two colors within that, right? So it's fading from one color to the other, it's just also fading the opacity out. Awesome. So on to our next tool, which is our notes. Now, I don't think I've ever had to use this or anyone who uses this, but let's say there's 6 of us working within the same file and I wanted to leave a note within the document. I will click twice and I would type in my note as such, close that out, and whomever comes next can see that there is something there, double click it, or sometimes just hover over it and it'll show you the note that's there. Some other times it'll just bring out the panel if you double click it. I think it's just letting me click into the text box instead. Then we have our eyedropper tool. In here we have a color theme tool as well. So if, let's say we have a photograph with many beautiful colors and we wanted to make a theme out of it, meaning use the colors within the photograph throughout our template. Let's pick this image. It will collect a theme that I can then add to my library, as you guys can see over here. And then my cursor has changed. Now it is ready to give out those colors to anything. Notice that it's detecting that this is type and that it can give it a color. Now it's detecting that this is type and that it can give it a color. And you can do this to shapes or anything of the sort. I'm just gonna undo this real quick. Now underneath we have some movement tools or hand tool to pan around our document if need be, and our zoom tool as we do with any other software. And I think that's pretty much it.